Welcome back into NFL in a Flash here on Sports Radio, WNML.com. With Joel Silverberg, I'm Eric Kane, and it's time to get you caught up on Week 8 of the NFL season. Joel, a lot of games went by last weekend. The trade deadline happened yesterday, halfway through the season, but let's go ahead and start off with our first firing. The Cleveland Browns, Jimmy Haslam, has decided to can Hugh Jackson amidst a 2-5-1 start. Also, offensive coordinator Todd Haley. A little mind-boggling considering he went 1-31 in 2 seasons, and now 2-5-1. Really an opportunity to win a couple more games than he already has. His best season to date. But what do you make of that?
I guess for me, he didn't really have the roster that most coaches would have been able to succeed with his first 2 years. The Browns roster is much improved. There's no denying the talent that's on there with the addition of Jarvis Landry. I think Baker Mayfield has adapted well into the NFL, but you look at the roster that they have, and they're still struggling to win games. They've been competitive in some of their losses, but with Jackson still being unable to win, I think it was the signal to the front office that, okay, this isn't going to work out. We're not going to be able to win, but the roster isn't the problem anymore. You can't use the roster as the scapegoat for the coach. So with that in mind, I think it was best for the Browns to go ahead and cut ties with Jackson.
Long term, a lot of names being swirled around right now. Of course, short term, they went with Drew Smith, I believe, but long term, Sean McVay's name's been tossed around, Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, but Mike McCarthy's a guy that's kind of on the hot seat in Green Bay. His name's being swirled around. Who do you think might be that next guy in Cleveland after this season?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know where that coach's search could go, because do they want to go with somebody young or do they want to go with somebody a little more experienced? Mike Mularkey's name was thrown out there. I don't know how well that would go, but there's going to be more firings throughout the course of the season, so I would think that with Greg Williams serving in the short-term interim role for right now, I don't expect him to hang on as the head coach beyond this season. So I would see how some of the other firings go. You may have a coach that's proven but not getting the job done at his current location, something like that, where one of those coaches fired could make the move over to Cleveland, because the roster is there. So it's not so much a job that no coach wants to take anymore. So I would just keep an eye on how the rest of the coaching carousel plays out and then see if the Browns try to go from there.
Greg Williams, longtime assistant in the National Football League, spent time with the Rams, the Titans, and the Saints, of course, and so on and so forth. Joel, a lot of moves happened yesterday prior to the NFL trade deadline. Demaryius Thomas makes his way to Houston. Dante Fowler Jr. is going to Los Angeles, and Mike Montgomery shift to Baltimore. A lot of guys on the moves, but who was probably moved that will have the most impact on his new team, will help his new team the most?
I think Golden Tate and Demaryius Thomas, the two wide receivers, with Tate going to Philadelphia, Thomas going to Houston, especially in a division that's so wide open, with Houston now kind of taking a game-and-a-half lead after having won 5 straight. That could be huge for Deshaun Watson. After they lose Will Fuller for the season, they get Thomas to come in. So that could be a really big impact in a division where the Jags defense isn't that great. The Titans defense, especially in the secondary, is struggling. So Demaryius Thomas, a veteran receiver who, when he's at his best, he's really good. And so for a guy like Deshaun Watson that's mobile enough to keep plays alive, I wonder if a veteran receiver that can find openings and coverages and things of that nature could be really beneficial for Houston. But I like Golden Tate. Last couple of weeks seemed like a drop-off in his usage as much with what they've had in Marvin Jones Jr. and the rest of that receiving core. So I like him in Philly because I think Carson Wentz, if they start finding him a little bit more, just adding to what they have with Alshon Jeffrey and the guys that they have over there. So those two wide receivers I'm really intrigued to see moving forward.
Yeah, I think Fowler Jr. moving from Jacksonville to Los Angeles is going to be a huge move because, as great as that defense is, as great as that front seven is, they haven't been able to get pressure on the quarterback. And a team that's undefeated is, so good everywhere. That was kind of their weakness. So I think Fowler Jr. going to Los Angeles will be good there. Our playmaker of the weekend, before we talk MVP through the midseason, I'm going to go with Deshaun Watson. You brought him up, and of course he's got a new target now in Houston against the Dolphins. 5 touchdowns, 238 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. That's not bad.
Yeah, I would throw out Jared Goff with what he was able to do after Todd Gurley didn't have a great first half. The Rams offense was slow out of the gate, and he took a beating and was still able to deliver for Los Angeles in the end against a really tough opponent in Green Bay that has struggled at times this season, but needed a win on Sunday, and Jared Goff was able to make sure they didn't get it. Now, you needed the fumble at the end by Ty Montgomery coming out of the end zone, but I think with what Jared Goff was able to do to stand in the pocket and make the throws that he made, get the balls to his playmakers, thought he really did a good job, and he's handled himself really well with the Rams not having Cooper Kupp the last couple weeks.
Week 8 of the NFL season is done. It's officially the midway point. The majority of teams have played 8 games. Now, there's some that have already had their bye and they're moving on and going forth towards that 8th game. But halfway through the season, a lot of names when you think of midseason MVPs comes together. Pat Mahomes, obviously. Todd Gurley, obviously. Alvin Kamara for the first quarter was really on pace to be an MVP of the league, caliber. For me, if I had to pick an MVP right now at the midway point of the 2018 season, I would have to go with Todd Gurley, the running back out of Los Angeles, not only because of what he does on the ground, what he does in the receiving game. He has over 1,100 yards total all-purpose so far this season, and he has 15 touchdowns. Hard to argue with the best player on the best team.
Yeah, and he had 19 touchdowns all of last season combined, rushing and receiving. He's on pace to take on a much heavier workload while still putting up the same numbers and averages, even more so than he was a year ago. So if he keeps that up for the rest of the season, it's already looking like a career year for Todd Gurley. For the sake of throwing out another name, I would throw out Mahomes. Just his efficiency, what he's been able to do with the offense, the fact that the Chiefs are a one-loss team halfway into the season with a defense that's not particularly great. So leading the division, lost to the Patriots, but competed well in that loss. So nobody has really made this offense at least look bad through 8 or 9 games into the season, depending on or 7 or 8 games into the season, depending on where you're at. But I think for the Chiefs and what Patrick Mahomes is doing in his first full year as a starter, second year in the league, you got to applaud what the youngster out of Texas Tech is doing. It's been a lot of fun to watch.
Real quick, Jameis Winston was benched on Sunday in favor of Ryan Fitzpatrick, who nearly led a comeback. But if you're Tampa Bay, if you're wanting to make this move right now, and I know they said that it's not long-term, but do you still view Jameis Winston as a franchise quarterback?
I don't. I could see him almost taking the Alex Smith route. Not in the sense Alex Smith never really had any serious off-the-field issues, but it took him a while to get going and to start playing like a really solid NFL quarterback after his first few years with the 49ers. So I think Winston could be a late bloomer. I don't know if that necessarily makes him a franchise quarterback or not, but it's not ideal. And I think for the Bucs, I don't see him being their long-term future. And I don't know if he's with the team after this season. It's been very disappointing, I think, to watch because his talent is unquestioned. It's not a matter. He's got the toughness. He's got the physical tools. He's got the intangibles. He's got the arm. Just the decision-making and what he's done off the field as well has been very poor. And that's also reflected. It's not even a matter of a guy that's performing well that you're trying to cover up for because he's got some off-field issues. You go out and throw 4 picks. There's no defense for that.
Tennessee will be back in action coming off their bye week on Monday Night Football against the Cowboys next week. Halfway through the 2018 NFL season, 8 weeks down, 8 more to go. With Joel Silverberg, I am Eric Kane. This has been NFL in a Flash on Sports Radio, WNML.com.